Welcome to the BYOB Podcast. Today I have a new client on board to add a bit of variety to the episodes. So Schalk Kock is a relatively new customer to me, but not new to Australia. He's been here for a few years after coming over from South Africa. And I have lots of friends in South Africa, so it's really good to talk to him because we're very similar cultures, very similar personalities. We both come from tech, and I think you'll find this interview really interesting. So Schalk, welcome to the show.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation, Andrew. I think maybe just as a brief introduction, so my name is Schalk Kock, as you just mentioned. I'm the director for a company that's known nowadays as Innovatec, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. So thank you for the opportunity to join you on the show.
Yeah, great to have you. So we will talk about your journey of how you started that business and what you do. And the reason I love talking about it because it's brand new. And so we're going through all the machinations of building a pipeline and starting a business and all the decisions you have to make. And it's right in the thick of things. But before we do get to that, I just wanted to go back to a bit of history because it's always revealing to me in terms of why people go through this process of starting a business. So I wanted to go back to way back to when you had your first paying job. And I was curious, in South Africa growing up, what was it like back there? Did you have paper rounds or what? Lemonade stands? What were you doing?
Yeah, look, going back to the first paying job, I joined what was, at the time, what was known as Arthur Anderson Consulting.
So that was first paying job?
Of uni.
Really?
Yeah, they were the first sort of paying job. Oh, look, I did a few bits and pieces, sort of worked at Dad's sort of shop and things
I want to hear
like
about that.
So Dad's in wholesale pharmaceuticals. So I worked as a picker in his store and then as a driver, delivery boy, delivering stuff, which was interesting in those days to earn a little bit of pocket money.
Is this in Johannesburg?
Look, that was way back in a town called Welkom in the Free State, Orange Free State, which is pretty much in the center of South Africa.
Ah, wow.
So I grew up, was born down in Port Elizabeth and then moved to Welkom in the Free State and then eventually ended up in Johannesburg, Pretoria area where I studied and met my wife as well. So yeah, look,
how did your parents end up there? In that, like that's a weird place to go.
Look, Dad was in many ways the pioneer that opened up the various branches for the wholesale pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
We stayed sort of 7-8 years in a specific city and then moved on. As he opened up the new branches for the company that he worked for at the time. So my first paying job was really working in the store as a pharmaceutical sort of picker for Dad, and then eventually I became delivery boy.
Right, so how old were you when you were doing that?
Oh, look, I was about, 15, 16 years old, 16, round about there.
Allowed to be taking drugs or?
So yeah, look, I mean, it's not picking as in what you do in the chemist. It's more sort of just off
Boxes.
The shelf into a blue box and stuff like that. So it's more sort of imagine a store environment, where you kind of got medication on the shelves and you've got a picking slip and you pick it from the shelf into the box and that's kind of it. And then eventually I got my driver's license at 18 and then
I was 18
became delivery boy.
Okay.
Yeah, 18 over there.
Is it dangerous? I know my mates who live in Joburg, that can be dangerous driving around. Was it like that back in the Free State, or was it a bit more safer? Or
look, it's pretty similar to here, to be honest, Andrew.
Good.
I mean, things back in those days were not as bad, I think, as they are today. But yeah, it was pretty similar conditions, really good tarred roads and so on. So at the time,
it's funny because I'm picturing giraffes running around and zebras across the road because just like if people from America look at Australia and go, there's kangaroos everywhere, and which there kind of are, but what this vision of in the middle of Africa thinking it's going to be like that. But
yeah, no, look, it's not it's not quite like that. It's funny you should say that, because I've heard that analogy before, and people are asking, are there lions in the street and that sort of thing. So no, not really. No, look, I mean, it's a little bit different in South Africa. I think most of the game and so on are in sort of, camped off game reserves and things like that. So it's protected to some degree over there. So, the roads and things. But to be honest, the conditions were pretty similar, or was in those days. Yeah. I believe nowadays it's not quite as good anymore, but it used to be pretty good. So yeah.
And then most people travel to a destination place for university, but you, like overseas, I know a lot of people, but you stayed in South Africa.
Yeah, so look, I studied at the time what was known as Rwanda Afrikaans University. Nowadays it's known as the University of Johannesburg. Met my wife there as well, but studied a BCom informatics or information systems pretty much, which was part of computer science. So also did an honours degree or postgraduate degree in that. So yeah, that was pretty
early days to get in computer science. What attracted you to that? Was in the 90s?
Oh, look, it's a very interesting story, Andrew. I mean, you've got to understand the sort of the background or the mechanism of how we got there. But I grew up, as I said to you, in the Free State, and in the Orange Free State, we didn't have computer science as a 7th subject in schools. And then in what was known as Standard 9 or Year 11 equivalent here in Australia, my parents relocated from Welkom in the Free State to Vereeniging, which is essentially in Gauteng, in the Gauteng province now. Over there, my friends had computer science, but now they took computer science from the Standard 8 or equivalent of Year 10 over here. So by the time I got there, I was about a year behind. But I've always had an interest in computer science and really enjoyed reading up about it and that sort of thing. So what was interesting was, because my friends obviously had computer science, I went to the teacher and said, look, can I join the class? Yeah. And at the time, because I was a year behind, she said to me, look, here's the manual. If you go and read it and study it and write an exam in about 2 or 3 weeks' time and pass the exam, then I'll allow you in the class. But, as a Year 11 student, that was never going to happen, right? So,
such a great story of overcoming the odds.
That was never going to happen. So, but what I did was I held the book, and then I read the book in between. And the interesting thing was, sort of towards the back end of my Year 11 and Year 12, I was actually helping and supporting as part of the people that was attending class. Yeah. So and that sort of made me decide to go and study computer science or go down the information systems path. Which is I've never looked back. It's really something that I enjoy, and perhaps I really just enjoy the subject matter and the area.
Yeah, and because you sort of specialize in university a little bit in terms of information data management, is that correct? And how to store.
Oh, look, not really so much at university. Look, information systems and economics and that sort of thing was more sort of generic. I really started sort of more specializing once I joined Accenture at the time, or Anderson Consulting as it was known in those days. I joined what was known
before then.
Yeah, it was Anderson. So look, Arthur Anderson Worldwide, and there was two. There was Anderson Consulting as a subdivision. Anderson Consulting and Arthur Anderson. Now, Arthur Anderson was, in those days, the auditing arm, whereas Anderson Consulting was the consulting division. And I joined what was known as the technology competency in those days. So I joined technology, and then eventually, started going into strategy and data and systems implementations, did a lot of work in the Siebel CRM space.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, Siebel. Wow.
So that's So that's sort of the early days, and that that kind of led to a lot of that.
Was it a lot of IBM gear back then, or were they fairly dominant?
There was in South Africa quite a bit of IBM gear around. Also HP, and that was pretty much it. I remember, it was one of my. Well, there was still early days. We were awarded a project down in the Eastern Cape in South Africa at Koch, which was a very, very interesting project. It's a very poor part of the country. I think the unemployment rate there was around 87%.
Oh, wow.
So it's very, very high. Wow. So the government put a project out to create a deep water harbour there, and it was known as the Koch Development Project, and they established a management body known as the Koch Development Corporation. So from an Accenture point of view, we won the piece of work, and so essentially then had to go and set up a call center. But what was interesting about this project was, we started off with, almost a building project.
Yeah.
And then, having to get, wiring done and electricity done and plumbing done. And, then eventually we were responsible for the SAP CRM software, and we developed that, and we worked with a third party to get telephones installed and all the rest of it. So it was an interesting project. There was
very hands-on.
So that kind of very, very hands-on. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. That's what I like about working in businesses. You get to do such weird and interesting things and meet different people, and I think it's fascinating. But so you were there for a little bit, but then you moved on. Is that right?
Yeah, look, I've spent what was about 11 or 12 years, the first 11, 12 years of my career with them.
Good base.
Then I moved, I kind of moved on and started my own company with two colleagues, two ex-Accenture colleagues, a company known as Bahorsi Consulting in those days. And we grew that company over sort of 2 to 3 years' time. And then I went to one of the banks, the major banks over there, and a half an hour meeting sort of turned into a much longer conversation. And then I eventually joined the change function within one of the major banks in South Africa for a while before we immigrated. I think that experience was really invaluable in terms of coming to Australia, because it, when I then reached out and spoke to Accenture over here in Melbourne, that banking and financial services experience was really what they were after for some of the engagements over here. So, that was very good. It's interesting sometimes when you look back at your career and you see how the various pieces and the experience that you've gained along the way kind of led from the one to the next, to the next, to the next step in your career, and how it kind of builds in many ways. So,
yeah, looking forward, you don't know where it's going, but looking back and go, oh, that made sense. And, oh, gee, lucky I did that, because that added to this. And because
100%.
Just backing up a step. So, you're over 10 years at Accenture, you're obviously doing well, and then you decided to start your own business, which is the first time, right? And which is often I know when you're young, you sort of, you got a lot of confidence and you think, I can take on the world sort of thing. So was there a bit of that bravado, as in I can do it better myself, or was there just an opportunity, or the company you weren't getting good projects, or what led to that first?
Oh, look, what led to the first jump was, maybe a little bit of bravado, but also the opportunity to go out and kind of do your own thing, right? So I was fortunate, and look, to be honest, I learned a lot through my career at Accenture. I think the nice thing about joining major consulting firms like that is it gives you a really good ground, learning ground, and a way to prepare yourself for future. But at some point you get to a point where you kind of go, it'd be nice to kind of do my own thing and see how that goes. And I think we got to that point where, we made that decision. And then at the time, two of my colleagues had the same sort of view. And so we started the company, so that's kind of what led to it the first time around.
But don't gloss over it, because a lot of people do think about it, imagine if, but not a lot of people do it. So, a very small percentage of people actually have the guts to quit and start their own thing, which is a great testament. I mean, and you ran it for several years. And so when you left that to go to the bank, was that just because that was a great opportunity, or was it a bet? It was like, wow, this.
Oh, look, it was a hard decision, but I think the opportunity at the bank was a really good one, in the sense that I don't know if you remember, but at the time, I think the big four bank I was talking about, they got bought out, or the controlling share in the bank was bought by a UK-based bank. And that was a really interesting project that was happening over there, and I got involved in a bit of that. So was interesting. Was an interesting opportunity. I've never really, up until that point, for the entire, what was that, about 15 odd years, first 15 years of my career, I was just in consulting. So I've never really worked in an industry role, which was what that offered to me was to, and I guess that was part of the appeal, in addition to the project. Also, the fact that it would have been nice to just see what it looks like to work within an industry role, because it was a very different experience to being a consultant, getting involved in or getting, sort of employed at a certain level, very different politics and hierarchical aspects that I'd play inside a large corporate organization, as opposed to a consultant where, you pretty much walk up to senior stakeholders and request a meeting. All of a sudden now you slot into a hierarchy, which is a very, very different sort of scenario. But it was interesting experience nonetheless, because I think it gives you the opportunity to learn a lot about your client, and what they are going through, and the environment that they work within, which I feel is a really good experience, especially for someone that's in consulting.
Yeah, I think that's being on client side gives you that other side of the perspective of transactions, because you're a consultant, you work with many clients, and they're working with many consultants, but working on both sides give you that experience, and also big consulting, small consulting. So you've done the whole gamut by the time you even got to Australia. Was that project related to data though? Because I know that that's a bit of your speciality. Is that something
that was more change and transformation, not so much. Look, the data thing really sort of took off in Australia more so over here. Again, sort of strategy, but then we did a lot of work in data and data governance, and that's sort of a journey that started for me. When we came across and immigrated to Australia.
And why Australia? I have to say, why'd you come to Melbourne? Like anywhere could have gone the UK.
Or look, I mean, we did look at all the options, and I mean, I don't know how many other South Africans you've spoken to, but typically you do have the inevitable shortlist, which goes Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, and then there could be a couple of other options to that list as well. And we considered all the options, London, UK, Canada, and I thought to myself, it's a bit cold, over there. The weather is not always as great. New Zealand was an option, but I think in many ways Australia is very similar to South Africa. It's probably the closest. If you look at the cultural aspects, you look at your standard of living, the outdoor life, here, the food, a lot of things here in Australia is very, very similar to the way I was used to in South Africa. So it was really a very good fit, and that's ultimately why we decided to come to Australia. And then, I mean, to come to your question around why Melbourne, it pretty much came down to where we had work and where there was an opportunity to settle ourselves. So I was open to, Perth, Adelaide, Sydney, Brisbane, wherever we got an opportunity. And then the opportunity came in Melbourne. So we pretty much, then came across to Melbourne, and we had some friends over here as well, which made it easier from a transition. Which made it easier from a transition point of view. So, when you're an immigrant, your friends becomes your family over here. So, in many ways, that was interesting.
Is there a big South African community in Melbourne? I've got personally quite a few friends because we just get along
very big.
well. But is it bigger than Sydney and Brisbane, for instance? Or?
Oh, look, I mean, that's tough. That's tough. I know there's a large community in Sydney and in Brisbane and also in Perth.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure how it compares to the other communities, but yeah, there is a pretty large community here in Melbourne as well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, and I suppose that's the first route that people normally take is, find the people similar, and then you branch out and just find friends in industry and from different other associations. So, so then you're at Accenture Melbourne, so doing work there, and you were saying because something to do with the bank was similar. That's why they hired you, wasn't it? Was that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, look, I was, I mean, one of the major reasons for me joining here was to then join a project here with one of the major Australian banks. And I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to lead the New Zealand stream of that particular piece of work. So I worked with the bank's executive team over in Wellington, which was interesting, traveling back and forth between Melbourne and Wellington. I don't know if anyone is, or if you've ever flown into Wellington, but Wellington has a tendency of being pretty windy as a city. And sometimes, when you fly in with those Boeings, they actually fly in sideways and then turn.
Oh, really?
Twist and turn the nose in at the last minute when it's so very windy. So it's an interesting experience. But yeah, so look, that was a very interesting project, I must say. Working with that particular bank. So it was, but I think my experience from South Africa was quite, was good in terms of that because it was pretty similar, not exactly the same, but very similar. And therefore a really good fit. So yeah, that was the early days with Accenture.
And then consulting again.
Yes, and then consulting again. Look, I had a small stint with a strat consulting firm called Third Horizon, and then I joined Protiviti. Now that started the first of two sort of almost 5-year stints where in both with Protiviti and BDO, where I established the technology consulting function and then grew the function in both cases, so, kind of grew the pipeline, grew the opportunities and grew the team. And that was valuable experience. I must say I quite enjoyed both of those companies that I've worked with, BDO being the last. But, I guess the lingering sort of idea of doing your own thing, which sort of started way back after the Accenture initial stint was always there. It was always brewing in the background. So after so many years and then also, having done that twice in the last 10 years, in terms of establishing a team and growing the team and growing the pipeline and capability and so on, the opportunity came around for me to start Innovatec, which is really, where I'm at the moment.
So, and I wonder whether if you did 10 years of your own consulting back in South Africa, whether you'd still have that desire to do it again, but it was only a few years. So maybe that was just like, oh, not quite finished, want to, tick that box properly,
There could be a little bit of that. I think it's also a case of, coming to Australia. I think starting, having, first of all, not understanding how things work over here, getting to know how the economy works, how people work, how, it all fits together. There had to be a little bit of a learning experience. I think, I'm very grateful towards a lot of the companies and firms I've worked with before starting Innovatec, because I think, getting that exposure, getting that experience, and sort of almost learning your trade again, but learning it in a new country and how that happens over here. I think that was necessary. But, we got to a point now where I feel I've mastered that. And, now it's an opportunity for me to go back to, what I wanted to do and where I was hoping to get to. So they're very excited about the journey now ahead and the path that we've embarked upon. I feel it's a very exciting opportunity and a journey that we're on now. So
it's interesting.
We'll see.
You seem to have a thirst for always doing new things, like, and all new, you're always growing things and starting things and, changing things. It must be you get a lot of joy from and satisfaction from, watching something grow. Like one of my good mates, my best mate, he makes furniture. So, there's pride in going, there was some wood and now there's a table. Look how beautiful it is. Whereas in intellectual property, our creations are slightly different. They're companies or brands or, so you must get a lot of satisfaction from building teams and capability and taking on new challenges.
100%, but it's also the challenge. So I like a really good challenge. I've always done, had that sort of drive in me. If you tell me I can't do something, I'll show you how I can. It's just that challenge that there was there in terms of, setting up a new capability, setting up a team, setting up a pipeline, and doing that, and then now embarking upon an Innovatec. It's the new challenge. And I mean, I guess for me personally, that's what sort of drives me is that opportunity, that challenge, the sort of, it's almost like, being on the hunt all the time, but how can I describe it? It's just that drive to achieve something and to, kind of meet the challenge.
I think it's very human. I mean, we run marathons, we climb mountains, we seek out new territories. It's a thirst for adventure, and it keeps us stimulated and keeps us interested and gives us a purpose. So, I see that in a lot of entrepreneurs. Just have that internal quest to do stuff. But again, it's not normal. Like a lot of people just want to sit on the couch and watch TV. So to have that get up and go and, when you get comfortable, I think you get comfortable and go, oh, that's not as stimulating as it once was. So when most people go, fantastic, now I can just rest. But you're like, no, on to the next one. And that's a trait. That's an entrepreneurial trait for sure. So tell us a bit more about Innovatec and what you're doing now, just for people who might be curious, because we keep mentioning it, but we don't tell them what it is.
Yeah, fantastic. So look, Innovatec is a management and technology consulting company. I mean, very similar to what I've done before at Accenture and Protiviti and BDO. We are down the path of helping clients sort of define their strategy and strategic direction. Once we've done that, we help them through transformation. And then we look at various aspects. I think we touched on data earlier. Every strategy and transformation you go through has an underlying data component. And that's an area that I've built a lot of specialization within, is to help organizations define their strategy, strategic direction. And they also put some of the governance around the data. The fourth element there is to look at regulatory compliance. So coming from a financial services type background, but not just financial services, more broadly so, there's cross-industry clients that also have regulatory requirements and compliance requirements. So have done a fair bit of work in that. And then the last bucket of services that we provide really looks at products and operations. So, to give you an example, I often get clients talk to me and say, look, I've got an HR system, but the HR system that I've got is dated. So can you come in and help us look at options and then help us implement the system, or a finance system? We've outgrown our finance system. We now need something that's capable of seeing us through the next 10 years. What can we do in terms of this, and what solutions are out there that sort of integrates into our existing environment and that sort of thing. So that's sort of helping from a products and operations point of view. The other area there that clients often talk to me about is business continuity. Now, with cyber being so prevalent at the moment, business continuity becomes very relevant. What do I do when I get a cyber attack and my business and I'm not able to operate? What does that look like? So that's sort of that operational side of things as well. So that's really what we do at Innovatec. We are a small company at the moment, and we are really looking forward to growing. I think the way in which we approach consulting, though, is slightly different to your traditional consulting firms, because we take a more risk-based approach to providing the consulting services. And then the other side of it is I hear this often from my clients, is many of our competitors tend to, when they engage, they tend to put junior resources in and then, bill fairly substantial amounts for those junior resources. Whereas as a smaller firm, we really, it's people like myself and contractors that are working with me that are quite experienced, and so we don't put junior people in. Our clients really get the benefit of the experience that we bring through lengthy consulting careers. So that really, therein lies a level of differentiation that we offer to our clients.
And you've got a lot of expertise.
That's Innovatec.
Yeah, and because the data thing was really fascinating to me when we had conversation, because I come from technology and I come from working at IBM and Hewlett Packard and Telstra, and all of those pillars you discussed all have a connection to data. Cyber steals your data. You've got to protect against that, and to have systems and processes and those databases and systems all store data. And it's really, I hadn't really thought about it how you explained it to me, of how it's so elemental in everything that we do. And information systems, is really information, which is data. So it's sort of so core, and we don't think about it as much. We think of the outcomes, we don't think of the inputs and how you use it, how to access it, where you store it. There's just lots of things you opened my eyes to when we had that sort of previous conversation. So I think that having that as a centerpiece is something that people can always talk to you about if they're curious. That's why you're running a webinar on it.
Yeah, Andrew, look, the reality there, and I don't want to run ahead of my webinar on the 12th, but the reality there is, as a society and as a business community, we're storing so much data and information nowadays. And in fact, I'll talk more about it on the webinar, but I think Eric Schmidt from Google mentioned that, nowadays we store the same amount of data than what was stored in prior years over decades. We do it a couple of days. And if you start thinking about that, therein lies a really big challenge for us as a business community, but also, the man in the street, everyday man in the street, because I think the challenge is, because we're storing such a lot of data, well, how do we manage that? How do we govern that? How do we, and that, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but when I think about it, that's really, for me, where the cyber issue starts.
100%.
The cyber, the cyber issue for me is not really a cyber issue. It's a data issue. Because if we had proper controls in place, if we knew how to manage our data properly, if we governed it properly, I don't think cyber would have been such a big issue as it is. The reason why cyber is running away so much, and that's just my personal view, is because we don't have a proper grip or handle on our data that we're storing.
And because so much, and it's exponential growth. And so companies
100%.
that are collecting things they don't need, it's stored in places they've forgotten about because staff move on, and it's like, oh, what's that thing over there? Oh, wow, we didn't even know we had that. I bet you a lot of people who've been hacked in Australia didn't even know, like the senior people would not even know where that data is. Like they would not have a mental grip on that process because it's so big and it's so hard to fathom. And it changes so frequently. So it's really quite a complex issue.
Yeah, that is a very big issue. So that's why, that is one of the areas that I've specialized within in the last sort of 10 years or so, is really that area of data and data governance and helping clients and organizations look at this differently. And we've defined a really good framework at the webinar. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's a really good framework. Look, there's some really good methodologies out there in the market nowadays. The challenge I think that many clients has is it can be quite complex if this is not the area that you specialize within, or if this is not your area of focus. So what we try to do at Innovatec is really to draft and define a framework that tries to make it easier for the every man in the street or everyday business person. And I'm not, by saying that, I'm not undermining anybody's ability or whatever, but I understand, I hear a lot of clients talk to me and say, look, most of these data things are just way over my head. I just don't get it. And that's understandable as that's not your area of focus. So that's why we try to find a way to solve that problem. And I think the framework that we've developed and defined gives clients that ability to at least sort of understand how that works and a way to go about this. Because I think when I speak to clients more often than not, they just don't know where to start.
Yeah, don't know where to start.
It's really the big issue is that it's like a mountain in front of them, and you can't really see the wood for the trees because it just seems so big.
Yeah. I was really hoping you'd use the eating the elephant, analogy there, because that would have been so apt although it's a bit close to home. Last time you tried to eat an elephant, it was too much.
How do you eat the elephant bit by bit?
I think all the people who are not dads out there will be cringing with our dad jokes, but so they won't be listening anyway. Now, so just to pivot a little bit on, starting the business, it's only been fairly fresh for you, a few months. I just wanted to sort of, is it different from the first time? Is it harder? Is it easier because you've done it before? Is it harder because it's a different stage of life? You've got more responsibilities. Just take us through that little mental process.
Oh, look, I think I wouldn't say it's harder than the first time around. I mean, it's as with anything in life, nothing comes for free. So you've got to put in the hours. You've got to do the work, and I mean, it's long hours. It's weekends sometimes and late nights and that sort of thing. But it's rewarding in itself in the sense that. It's really, I've always got a kick out of helping clients get over a challenge. And when I talk to clients and they go, look, we just don't know how to go about this. And I go, well, let's understand your problem. Let's understand what's the cause and the root cause of the problem, and let's break it down. And let's sort of then try and find a way to solve your problem and then help them implement that and see the change that brings to them and the results that it brings into their business. Then often you sit back and you think, all the hard work, all the late nights, all the weekends, that's worth it.
Yeah.
You've made a difference. You've made a difference in people's lives. And on the odd occasion, you'll get the odd project where you're not just making a difference to your client, but you're also making a difference to someone in the public I remember a project, and I hope the particular client will forgive me when I talk about this, but there was a client that I worked with where we were trying to solve an industry challenge. And the industry challenge really resulted or involved helping females that are lesser privileged in terms of superannuation and their super savings. And we had to come up with a solution, and ultimately came up with a solution to kind of use loyalty rewards as a concept to help them uplift their savings. And it was such a rewarding project, not just from the sense of helping a client to bring a new product to the market, but also the ability to know that you're helping somebody from the public who may not have been in a good position at retirement, but because of the change work that you're doing now, that person is going to end up in a much better position when they get to retirement age than what would be the case otherwise. So sometimes you get to do those kind of projects, and that really just is the icing on the cake.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, I think from all the interviews I've done, the people who really get a kick out of just helping people are the ones that are the most successful, because then it's, obviously you want to get paid and you've got to feed your family and there's those things, but really it's the joy of doing the work. You got to enjoy actually doing the work. And those people who have longevity because they continue to do it, and, look, there's ups and downs in any business, but, you get through it because, the next project you're like, oh, gee, I can just envisage what this client could be like if I could help them, and there's certain amount of joy in that. So.
Yeah, look, I mean, if I had to do it just for the money, Andrew, I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't have done it. It's more the thrill or the kick that you get out of. So helping a client solve their problem, finding a solution, and seeing the difference that that solution makes in somebody's life or within their organization or whatever the case may be. That's really what it's about. And that's really what consulting's about.
Went down the right way.
Yeah, correct. I think, unfortunately, in many ways, consulting in the market has got the reputation of consultants have been tarnished a bit, unfortunately. But I think it's still a great career, still a great opportunity. And if there's any younger people listening to this podcast, I'd really encourage them to consider consulting as a career, because I think, if you're somebody that are looking for a constant challenge and somebody that likes to be challenged and somebody that likes to solve problems for clients, I think consulting is really a great career option and choice for you to consider.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my final question actually, is thinking back to you when you first started consulting the first time, what advice would have you given to yourself back then? What would be the one sort of golden, quote that you would say, I've got to do this? Is it cash flow? Is it, loving the customers? What do you think it is? Lots of coffee?
Oh, look, if I had to give myself advice, I would have said, be more bold in the way you go about things you're doing. I think at the start of my career, I suppose I could have been a bit more bold in the way I approached my career and in the way I approached life and things. And I think when I think back about it now, there's so much opportunity out there. Going for that opportunity should really be your focus. And so I think in terms of advice, it's probably
I love that.
Be a bit more bold about you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
I actually look back at my life and I think there's so many chances that I could have gone bigger, and and I didn't, because back then you're probably less confident and you're a bit risk averse, but now you're like, got to do it where you can. Don't wait.
100%.
Life moves on pretty quick.
Just go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Time doesn't wait for anyone. So, so the bottom line is, take the opportunities that you've got. I'd say, if you get an opportunity, have a go.
Yeah, we've done that.
Don't let it pass you by, because you never know, it may work. And look, to be honest, you're not always going to be successful. Sometimes you're going to fail, and that's fine as well. It's fine to fail, because that's the only way you're going to learn. And next time you'll do it better or you'll do it differently, and you'll learn from that experience. But I think being bold, going out there, take your chances, take your opportunities, and really enjoy life. That would be my advice.
Oh, I love it. That's great. It's a great finish. So I appreciate your time today, and we'll put all the notes down below of how to contact you, and they can check you out. So I really appreciate your time, and wish you all the best for the enormous future of Innovatec. I'm sure it'll do very well.
Fantastic, Andrew. No, thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity to join you on the show today. It was awesome. Awesome talking to you.
Well, we'll see you soon.
All the best.
We'll be doing more together in the future.